rivers change their size, but never leave the stream of warm permanent sand. So the days float as they're quite aware of what they're going through.
We'll continue along this line, with also partly somebody very active in the labor movement, Ajamu Nangwaya, who's also active in CUPE as well as an educator. Ajamu.
Good night, sisters and brothers. Good night, sisters and brothers.
Good night.
Okay, I just want to know that you're here.
Alive.
We're confronted with, I think some challenges as a result of Obama winning. One of the things that I found in my community, in the African community, it's almost as if I'm among the few people raising critical questions about Obama and what he represents for American imperialism and America's capitalism and maintenance of racist and even sexist structures in that society. It's almost as if the excitement about seeing the symbolic placement of an African person in a position of power has kind of shut down people's critical thinking. For me, as an African who was born in Jamaica, we also experienced the enslavement, we experienced colonialism. So then, in 1962, we had the displacement of direct British colonialism and the establishment of a neo-colonial system. And I know during that time, there were a lot of people who were excited about the fact that now we're seeing African and other racialized people assuming political power in the country. About 10 years ago, I went to Jamaica and I was with my father, and he was saying, oh, it's so great to have black people actually working as tellers. And then for me, as someone who had the advantage of post-secondary education, I'm saying, that's nothing to be a clerk. But when you say black people, you mean dark-skinned African people, because even there was a color bar at that time that prevented certain groups of Africans from being in visible position. So you see, it's almost like a generational and also a political gap between my father's experience of reality, my expectation of what should be in society, and how we can diverge over that. Today, I'm saying that Obama is the Pied Piper of American imperialism. The way that I see people throughout the world responding to Obama, the excitement, I'm just saying, aren't people looking at the program of this man, that there's nothing that suggests a deviation from American imperialism, American militarism, and also the way he would organize the domestic, social, and economic space. There was an article in the Toronto Star about a week ago, about 10 days ago, by Rosie DeMano, and after looking at Obama's program, her position that he would barely make it onto the Red Tourist team here in Canada. And that says a lot, because simply to talk about having a so-called universal health system is not universal, but goes further than what exists right now, wouldn't even put him within the realm of Canadian health policy. We don't even talk about the Nordic countries in Europe. When, what is his program in terms of, child care, universal child care? Even his educational program is suspect, because it's also tied up in this tax credit type of system that, again, it would be some sort of an advance. And I guess if you're looking at dialectical, we were saying, okay, more working class people would get access to post-secondary education, and there's some potential that some of them can become radicalized in the process of being exposed to a certain type of education. But again, that's very much dependent on having a political movement where people can see ideas that are contesting the dominant one. So I really, see him as the Pied Piper of the 21st century, and probably one of the most successful Pied Piper, because I don't believe in the story that I grew up on about the Pied Piper taking the children out of the town and going away with them. I don't think I've seen any political actor who has been able to mobilize people in the way that he has done. And I can understand why African people or racialized people inside America can feel that way, because their experience is being seen through a racial lens, that the economic marginalization that they may experience, they attribute that solely to racism. They cannot see how class structures play a role in their marginalization in society. And again, the political movements, the radical political movements are so weak, feeble, that we're not even influencing the political discourse that at least present an alternative to people. However, one thing I should say, that this economic crisis has another thing I should say about the Obama phenomenon in terms of his ability to mobilize people. It is very easy, well, it's relatively easy to mobilize people behind an election campaign because he asks very little of them. Maybe go to your neighbor, encourage them to go out and vote. You go and be a part of the campaign to register new voters. You may send $5, $25 through the internet. It really demands very little of you, and it doesn't have to, compared to organizing people, where you provide them with the skills, you provide them with knowledge, you try to create an attitude for a political progressive direction and program. It's just much easier, and that's, to me, the standard of engagement is much lower, mobilizing people behind an election campaign. Also, the 95% of African voters who voted for Obama is not unusual. Africans, at least since like the 50s or 60s, have given well over 90% of their vote to the Democratic Party. I think in the first Bush election, the Republicans got 1 out of 10 votes of African Americans, and people were saying, seem as if the Republicans are able to make inroads into the African vote. But again, I think it represents a certain class of African people, and certain people who are even opportunists, that they've seen certain opportunities within the Republican Party, and they will say, well, they'll shift from Democratic support onto to Republican. So it's not that unusual to see that type of shift in terms of the African vote. Also, what we've seen with Obama is that he was able to appropriate the instinctive and conscious desire for change and mobilize people between what is really almost a conservative to centrist program. He was able to, I think, appeal to people because it's not change that was going to be disruptive. It's a type of change that you could be very comfortable with. Also, the fact that he didn't interrogate racism, white supremacy in American society made him even more saleable and made him comfortable with a large number of, large part of the American electorate. But the thing that we should take note of, that all of this nonsense about post-racial America or post-racial politics is idiotic, because only 43% of the white voters gave him their support. A clear majority was still not comfortable with an Obama in the White House, even though John Kerry got about 40% of the white votes, but not, which I guess that's the stable Democratic votes among whites. But it nonetheless, to me, suggests that in spite of this excitement that he generated about politics, he still wasn't able to shift more of the white vote there. So this thing about post-racial politics, this is really something to put a very acceptable face on American domestic racism. Because I've seen Africans, other racialized people, pushing this theme of a post-racial politics in America. I've seen also whites also saying we're moving towards a post-racial politics. And what that's suggesting to me is that even in America, people are still uncomfortable dealing with racial oppression in that society. And Obama is feeding into that tendency, which I believe in 4 to 8 years will be exposed. Because it's not as if progressive people are sitting on the sideline. People are still organizing. We're weak. We don't have a lot of reach. And also just the expectation that, African people and racialized people have. It's hard right now for us to penetrate that expectation that people are having. However, this economic crisis, I believe, presents us with opportunities to organize, to push a socialist program, push a very progressive program in society, because I don't think any of us could create a narrative that could lay bare and expose the way a certain group of people in society live and how a certain group of people exploit the economic system in its own interest. I think it makes it easier for us to go and talk to people and point out to people certain issues of class oppression, certain issues of how the system operates, and that these features are fundamental features of the system. I was at a CUPE National Health and Safety Conference in St. John's in late October, and one of the things that I did in the workshops that I was in, was to bring up the question of political economy, of the struggle, that the struggle over health and safety is a struggle of labor over capital. One of the things that we will find absent in the labor movement's educational programs or in the educational infrastructure is the lack of political economy thinking, our content in our course. And those are the things that help maintain a certain political backwardness of the working class and doesn't prepare the working class ideologically to take on capitalism. So even inside organized labor, we've got work to do in the educational field. But one of the things that we have to be very clear about, and even some comrades will raise questions about my approach, is that we have to raise questions of class. We have to raise questions of how this economic system is organized, why it's organized, why it is that workers have a particular role in it, and what type of struggles we need to engage in. Because if people don't hear the political alternatives, if we don't present ideological alternatives, how will people be aware of what the options are? They would think the only options are to have an exciting guy like Obama who say that he's going to raise minimum wage to $9.25 by 2011 and to index the minimum wage rate to the inflation rate. And that doesn't do anything to challenge capitalism. So I say that we as socialists, we as progressive people have our work cut out. And in the latter part of my presentation, I will talk about some of the things that we can do. One of the things that I find pleasing even around this election, even though I'm very critical of Obama, is that a lot of young people registered to vote and participated in this political process. I think they represent some, great possibilities, great potential to present political alternatives. But it means for us as socialists, we have to be in those communities where people live. Because people don't even live at the point of production. People live in communities, and we have to be there. It has to be beyond coming to a community event, selling some newspaper, pushing some flyer to an event. It means that we have to be organizing with people about what they consider to be their felt needs. What are the things they consider to be primary? And as we're working with them, and we have to have an educational program, we start to infuse progressive ideas in it. And start, because anything that we frame, any program of action that we frame, we can infuse the progressive ideas that we think are correct to challenge capitalism, to challenge racism, and to challenge other systems of domination. But we have to be where the people are at. But those challenges are also in the labor movement. Because a lot of us as socialists, I think we end up only doing the theoretical stuff, the ideological stuff, but the people don't see us there, working with them, struggling around the issues that are central to them while presenting an alternative program. And that's part of the work that we have to do. What I saw in this election, and even here in Canada, because it's so surprising that there are so many people here within the African community who, if they could vote in the American election, would have voted. Some people send donation. We can't even inspire these people to donate $50 per year to a political project, but yet they're sending money to an American electoral contest to support a particular candidate. So is that, and sometimes we're saying that people are apathetic and they're disengaged, but how can we re-engage people with political ideas? How can we make political ideas something that people won't feel uncomfortable with or people feel bored by? Not that there were any political ideas being expressed by the Obama campaign that you see are critical or are excitable. It was just a lot of sloganeering and trying to almost provide people with political problem. We're not going to provide that. We're not going to provide our political problem. We're not going to water down the message of change and transformation, but we're going to find a way to engage people with critical political ideas, and it has to be in the realm of action. I think also when as we're focused on the U.S., one of the focus that we also talk about was Canada, because the U.S. imperialism is going to do what it normally does, but also what are we going to do here in Canada? And anything that we propose for America, I think we can do similar initiatives here in Canada. I was just looking at some materials from Obama's website, campaign website, and we're talking about the tax cut plan that he has. And one of the things that he said about his tax plan is that the Obama tax plan is a net tax cut. His tax relief for middle-class families is larger than the revenue raised by his tax changes for families with income over $250,000. Coupled with this, his commitment to cut unnecessary spending, Obama will pay for his tax cut relief while bringing down the deficit. What they also said about his tax cut is that even though he's going to raise taxes on the highest, the wealthiest 2% of Americans, it will still be less than the tax cut that the rest of the population, those earning below $250,000. He's afraid to tax the wealthy, to create programs. He's still wedded to this notion of tax cuts. Because those of us know that he's promising tax cut of $1,000 to some working class family, or what they call middle class family. And even we in the labor movement, but at least in the NDP, we have become fixated on this fictional middle class, where we have working class people that have now been turned into middle class people. There's no, but hey, I want to stay in CUPE, so I won't criticize the NDP.
We will.
You won't, okay. But you know, so it's even his tax cut plan is not going to do anything to expand certain universal social rights and create universal programs that would benefit the working class. One thing I should say about Obama is that I think he's a militarist. Obama is a militarist because his military program was more aggressive than that of John McCain in terms of the military spending. He proposed to increase ground troops by 65,000 and the Marines by 27,000. And when you look in terms of his ideas about how to preserve global reach in the air, you're thinking, wow, this guy is really aggressive about increasing the military. His position on ensuring freedom of space means freedom of space for America to maintain American domination. It sounds like he's still into the Star Wars business, and he may have been someone who grew up on Star Wars, so he has a very fond affection for Star Wars, but that may be adolescent. Now he's a man. We realize that this idea of Star Wars and fighting war in space is discredited. The technology, is not up to snuff, at least right now. Also in terms of maintaining power projection at sea, it's all about modernizing, recapitalizing the naval forces, replacing aging ships, modernizing existing platforms. Very much committed to militarism. And one thing we should realize is that a lot of people are saying he had to say these things to get elected. But I'm saying that it's more than that. This guy never served in the Navy. I remember in 1993, a draft dodger ascended the throne, the American throne. And one of the first things that he did this draft dodger, Slick Willie, was to bomb Baghdad because he wanted to show that he has the balls to bomb people unnecessarily. And I think Obama will face the same pressure because he doesn't have the military credentials. He's seen as soft, latte drinking. You're more likely to find him in Starbucks than to find him at a naval base. So, perception is also one thing, and I think that's in part the reason for him being so aggressive in terms of expanding American military forces to burnish his credit as a militarist. So, and one of the things I should say is that we know when governments or states increase their military, they're not going to use them to take children across crosswalks or take hot lunches to seniors. It's not going to be about that. It's to use to fight and promote America's interests overseas, or Western imperialist interests overseas. But in spite of all of those things, where do we go from here? And the first thing I look at as a trade unionist is, I think that the trade union movement or the labor movement, has a role to play in political transformation. And also, right now, it is not living up to that potential because as someone on the inside, and also someone who is who's a vice president on CUPE Ontario's executive board, I realized, even more so than when I was outside of the labor movement and critiquing the labor movement for its backwardness, when you go inside, you see in some way the corruptness of it, not necessarily in an economic sense where people are taking money and other things, but how they work to preserve the political system. Just to give you an illustration of even some backward thinking, in the CUPE Ontario Constitution, there's a charter that when you run for an executive board, you have to take an oath that you're not a part of an organization that would change the political system through extra parliamentary means. It won't prevent anybody, a communist, from being there, from getting there. But the fact that it still exists shows that, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do because a lot of groups have taken out those anti-communist charter. But what's interesting is the way it was worded. I said to a sister who's a communist, look at this, like something is wrong. And the person had to read it because the person did get onto the board and said the statement and didn't realize what it was actually saying. But it's clear. So we in the labor movement, for us to play the critical role, the catalytic role in social change that I think is possible, we also have to engage in political and economic education for activists and also for members. In the trade union movement, I think we have an opportunity because we have education and educational infrastructure. I think almost all unions out there have courses where we teach our members. So there we have an opportunity to teach them about the nature of capitalism and why it is an anti-worker system. We also have the opportunity to teach them about liberal capitalist political democracy and to show them how this is an anti-worker political system. We have to conscientize, we have to politicize our educational process. And also, since it's a new direction that we'll be going in, we may not necessarily be using the buzzwords and other things, but nonetheless, we can still teach them about Marx's labor alienation without even saying Marx or even using the buzzword, but teach them nonetheless. And once people start to get more politically advanced, they'll say, oh, so this is where this is from, oh, this is where that is from. Because one of the things that I think will turn off a lot of people is just being introduced to contrary ideas, to non-sanctioned ideas, is when we come on in pure ideological term that people still believe and still have some faith in the system as it is. So we have to find a way to get that out. By the labor movement, we can use our educational infrastructure to push a political economy, education, and to work in that educational process, structures that help people model the ideas that they have been exposed to. Also, I think the labor movement must commit itself to equity for equity-seeking groups. Because there's a lot of hypocrisy in dealing with racism in the labor movement, in dealing with sexism in the labor movement, and that is something that we have to deal with. we can't say this is something that's derivative of capitalism. It's just not, it's not the case. But nonetheless, capitalist structures will exploit racist division within the working class, because if a racialized brother or sister can't trust a white comrade, a white brother and sister next to them, how can we build working class solidarity? If white workers will benefit from racism and will use that to move forward or to get access to jobs, how can we build unity within the working class when we see people are benefiting from structure, even though that structure may be used to manipulate and to divide the working class? In the labor movement also, for us to play that role, we have to move away from the social service model of trade unionism, where you pay your dues, and when you need service, labor movement, labor movement will provide you with services around grievances and other things. We must develop structures that allow people to develop their capacity to participate in their own self-governance. The days of leader-led, we have the top leaders running things, it's just not something that is tenable with a progressive political orientation, both in Canada and in the United States. Also, while we're struggling against capitalism, what's our vision of the free and just and the good society? What type of structures can we build within civil society while challenging the dominant structures, that people can practice economic democracy, that people can practice self-management? Because I think if we wait for the socialist revolution where we achieve that, it may be much too late. How are people going to learn the new ideas? Because the thing that I've observed is that all societies contain elements within it that will then manifest itself in the new society. What are those type of political organs that we're developing where people can express democratic practices and political democratic practices? So those are some of the things I would like to explore as we go along. And also the question of what political formation are we going to have to lead us forward? Is it going to be social democracy? Or are we going to put our eggs into that basket, which I see as a type of socialist capitalism or welfare liberalist approach? And I'm talking about Sweden, Germany, and elsewhere where we have social democratic formation. We have to start to build that political formation that's going to lead political change. And we have to start to do that now. We have to start to do that now, because we've seen that the NDP in Canada is unable to fulfill that role. And I should say, and I think this is a positive thing, that there, at our last CUPE Ontario convention, there were members on the floor calling to create a working class party in Canada because of the position the NDP took on the back to work legislation. And it was something that was discussed at our board, and anyhow. But there's some possibilities for moving forward. And this is even independent of what's going on in the United States with Obama, because we have to organize irrespective of who are the people in power. But nonetheless, certain regime may create certain expectation that we can utilize, even though we may disagree with those regimes, because nothing like rising expectation in moving political movement forward. That happened in the 1950s with the Civil Rights Movement, and even during the French Revolution, there's rising expectation of betterment. So by the time they call the Estate General together, people were already beyond that point of having these little representative bodies. So rising expectation can play a critical political role in moving forward, but do we have the capacity as socialists and progressives to exploit those developments in society right now? I think that's it.